According to the AP, there are now 14 people dead as part of that terror attack that played out over the past few days. More than 100 are injured. We now want to bring in former NYPD officer, former Secret Service agent, and host of the Renegade Republican, Dan Bongino. Dan, these numbers keep going up. It is just heartbreaking, and time again we're seeing these types of vehicular attacks. You just heard there that report from Rob Schmidt in Times Square. Is this the right approach that we are taking here at home?
Well, Abby, the approach is changing. I think it's clear at this point that the fireman approach, if we can call it that, isn't working. And what I mean by that is these attacks happen and then we put out the fire afterwards. That's not working anymore. We have to become arsonists. One of your prior guests brought up a great point. It is time to transition to an all-out, really a full-fledged effort at the local, state, and federal level to start developing HUMINT, short for Human Intelligence Sources. It's the only way to break up these plots in advance. Because what the difference between this and a 9/11 style plot, and I want to be clear on this, is the 9/11 style plot required the attackers to get out of their communities, learn flight training, they had to go get money, they had to go contact people outside of their communities. To jump behind the wheel of a car and tragically mow people down, you can stay isolated for as long as possible and hold up in your cocoon and never leave an investigative footprint behind. You need sources to break these things up.
Well, it does sound, Dan, according to the authorities over in Spain now, the goal of these terror strikes was mass casualties. They killed 14 so far, at least 15 are in critical condition. They injured 100. There were 2 terror strikes, one the guy in the white Fiat van in Barcelona, and then these 5 guys were in the fake suicide vests in the seaside city of Cambras, about 70 miles away from Barcelona. But it sounds like part of the cell blew up. The cell was that they know of at least 12 people, but part of the cell blew up, it sounds like, on Thursday morning in that house where they were putting the bombs together. So obviously they were going to put the bombs somewhere. Maybe they had real vests there, but they all blew up as well. So then they went to plan B, which was to run down as many people as they could.
Yeah, and Steve, this was always the next evolution of the hostile vehicle attack. But what I mean by that is the chaining together of multiple attacks, an explosive attack, a vehicle attack, and then a vehicle attack somewhere else. And you may ask yourself, well, why? Why is that the next evolution? Well, the reason is it shows a level of sophistication and planning. And sophistication and planning has always been the hallmark of terrorist organizations looking to raise money in their profile. It's their way of saying, hey, look what we can do to you. Now we don't only run people down tragically, we can do it in multiple spots at the same time. Remember, they're losing at home, ISIS and a lot of these groups. The only way for them to generate the support they need to generate new recruits and funding is to show that they can do this elsewhere because they're getting their butts kicked at home. So this was always the next evolution, the chaining of multiple attacks together.
Dan, speaking of home, I want to focus on us here in America right now, and I want to ask you the same question I asked our guests earlier. The focus on political correctness, the focus on civil rights. Critics are going to say, well, we can't violate people's civil rights. That is not what we do in America. That said, you heard our 2 earlier guests said, we need to do what we need to do to protect the homeland. How do you respond?
Well, listen, Todd, I'm a First Amendment absolutist, so this isn't a problem for me at all in saying this. Guys, listen, practicing Islam in the United States is obviously protected. Thank the Lord, pun intended. I mean, everybody knows that. Practicing Islamic radicalism leading to terrorism is not a protected act in the United States. I mean, I can give you actual examples of how PC is hurting us right now. I mean, you had a plan in New York City a couple years ago where you had to generate, a pound of paperwork, if not more, to go surveil a mosque. Now, that's insane. I mean, obviously, there's no need to put cops in every mosque. Most mosques just do what they do, which is their religion, which is great, which is fine. But if you have someone in a mosque who says something that could lead to a terror attack or incites terror, and thankfully those incidents are rare, I don't understand, why is that some kind of a protected class? I mean, if that happened in any other church, whatever it would be, Zoroastrianism or whatever it is, you'd have police officers and FBI agents in there tomorrow. This political correctness is absurd. I mean, you saw it with the refugee crisis as well. Where, God forbid, you mentioned the fact that we couldn't vet refugees, you were immediately painted as some kind of phobophobe or ist or something, or a racist or something. It was insane. It was a reasonable argument to be had.
All right.
Right, but Dan, you know that the current mayor of New York City kicked the police out of going into the mosque, and it's not like they went in there and they wiretapped everything. They just sat in for the public services.
Which anyone else can do, Steve.
Right.
So let me get this straight. You put a badge on and automatically you're barred at the front door. I mean, it was a public place. It's an absolutely outrageous approach, and it's totally unnecessary. And there's no question that kind of stuff puts Americans in danger.
All right, Dan Bongino, great to have you on this morning. Always appreciate your perspective.